Imagine, Episode 16, by Bernard King and Nicholas Lumarine. Nicholas is ruining Jemma and Jerome's lives. His book is writing their future. He must be stopped. But how? Jerome is planning his death with the help of Gregory. Gregory was the grenade that Flesh and Blood Gregory had promised to trade with Jerome. After several phone calls to complete a deal that never happened, Jerome had placed the weapon on top of the ammunition cabinet. Such a weapon could not be included in his collection, but also could not be left anywhere else in the house. Now suddenly Gregory was not a weapon unique in his collection. Gregory would solve an awful lot of problems. A grenade exploding left no traces, no DNA, no fingerprints, no bullets for the police to pass under a microscope. Just death, shrapnel, and debris. Jerome wondered why murders had not been committed with the deadly handful. It had a 6-second fuse. The murder would have to be planned around those 6 seconds. He would have to research how far he could still accurately hurl a grenade and how wide the killing arc was. Quickly, he dismantled Gregory, checking the fuse and the condition of the explosive. He worked the firing mechanism several times after carefully removing the detonator, until satisfied the weapon passed serviceability. The scenario of hurling a dead grenade at Nicholas, watching it bounce with a dull click, and leaving them both gaping at each other, could not be envisaged. He locked his armory and started to cook his dinner. By the time he had eaten, washed up, and tidied the kitchen, he had a mental schematic for Nicholas's death. Jemma would wait until her husband was drunk and preferably incapable. She was driving to a meeting with Jerome and leave the car. Once she was clear, Jerome would drop the grenade through the open window of the car, and the all-seeing author would be blown to bits. The meeting place must be isolated, not only from humanity, but also from an awful lot of decibels. Grenades were not silent killers, and a surprise visit from an inquiring passer-by would be unwelcome. There would also have to be cover. A grenade exploding inside a car not only makes a mess inside the car, it makes a mess of the car. Mess that travels. Jerome did not want to be tapped on the head by a passing door, so the cover had to be fortified. There was only one venue that Jerome could think of that would be safe, sure, and have the necessary protection when the grenade exploded: a disused quarry. The internet provided plenty of possibilities, with the choices of chalk, granite, or sandstone. The picture of an old chalk quarry with 2 dead gates sagging on their hinges, set in the North Downs, seemed to offer the ideal venue, with the added plus of being only an hour and a half's drive from the Lumarines' flat. Book a room in the hotel in the nearest village. Jemma's order started the old pulsing across his chest. They would spend the next afternoon planning Nicholas's end, spend the night together, and return the next morning. The phone went down before Jerome could protest. Spending the night together was certainly not a problem, but there were 2 worries. Being close to the quarry and just an afternoon in the proposed scene of the crime was not long enough. He needed to know what movement and traffic busied themselves around the place. It would be a calamity if a stream of cars full of addos revving up for a rave rattled in just as he was releasing the grenade, or a local farmer tractored in a trailer full of rubbish for an illegal dump. Even seen walking around the quarry with Jemma was a no-no. A glamorous blonde in a disused quarry did not compute and would be remembered. Hoping no one would be around was relying on luck, and relying on luck was gambling, and gambling was something Jerome always avoided. Jemma's one visit to the quarry could only be to deliver her husband, and then she would hide herself in Jerome's car, which would be parked. Jerome's thoughts stopped. He did not know where his car would be parked. He did not know the layout of the quarry or the local roads. He was wasting his time planning until he got there. Much better to think about the night he would spend with Jemma. His stare at the telephone saw nothing. A hole was opening before him. The night with Jemma would be another stolen night, but that was not the point. They could not stay in a village near the quarry. It would be too dangerous. But that too was not the point. Nicholas's death had been fixed because of his writing to save Jemma, to stop him causing panic and destroying both their lives. But again, that also was not the point. The point was the hole he was looking through, the hole through which he could see another life, not just a night, but a life spent with Jemma. The thought had babbled around his brain since Jemma had mentioned it. Now it had punched its way to his consciousness. He had only looked as far as Nicholas's death. He had not considered the birth of his new future. Would the merger change their relationship? Would she still need him once her ogre of a husband was gone? His doubts abated. They would be committing the ultimate crime. For most couples, togetherness was the bond of love. For them, it would be the bond of love and their terrible secret. For a time, after the funeral, they would not be able to see each other. Jemma must play the distraught widow, and the sudden appearance of another man could cause glances over spectacles. Jerome would have to remain invisible for a period of decency, whatever that was. Right now, he had to concentrate on the deed and try and foresee problems before they became problems. But what if the grenade actually did not go off? There was no guarantee with any of Charlie's merchandise. It looked good, but was quite old. Old ordnance had let him down before. He would take one of his bayonets as backup. That would be the best solution to eradicating forensic evidence. Blade wounds could not be traced. But shoes were traceable. Shoes impressed the patterns that were on their soles, made apparently even on rocky terrain. Their shoes would have to be burnt as soon as they returned home, and they would park his car some distance from the quarry on hard ground. Tires told the same tales as shoes. 2 pages of an A4 scribble pad was filled with warning notes before sleep pulled down his eyelids. Nothing more could be done until he visited and surveyed in detail the venue for Nicholas's dispatch. In fact, it was a 2-hour drive. The A4 pad was on the seat beside him as he drove to the local village. The high street was busy, nicely busy, too busy for him to be noticed. The local station car park was jammed with commuters' cars. A cross went on the pad next to the parking facilities. The road that led towards the quarry was a turning off a secondary road, eliciting a tick, this time on the pad next to ease of access. He drove past the quarry twice, almost missing it for a third time as nature had moved on where the internet picture had not. The sagging gates had vanished, and clouds of brambles had settled around the gateposts, halving and hiding the size of the entrance. Excellent. So far, this quarry was fitting the task. Carefully, he backed out of the lane onto the road and began his search for a parking space. A deep ditch lined either side of the road for almost a quarter of a mile before it was broken by the entrance to the local station car park. No good, too far, and the car park was still full. Also, they would be seen on the walk, about 15 minutes, he calculated, between the quarry and the car park. Driving back past the quarry lane, the ditches stretched without a break even further, almost a mile before he was able to turn into a lay-by. That was worse than the station car park. Much too isolated, the quarry was losing its appeal. He was here, and even though this place would not work, he might as well do some research to fill the void in his education regarding quarries. Also, it would avoid writing off the afternoon as a complete waste of time. Turning into the lane, with difficulty he forced the car through the brambles and down a sloping path into the bowels of the quarry. Although this one would not suit, it would give him some idea of the layout of quarries. It was a huge hole on the ground, hacked down through the chalk of the North Downs. The crunch, as his tyres ground loose pieces of chalk covering the track to dust as he descended into the centre of the quarry, was amplified by the high jagged cliffs. Depression snatched at his windows as he sank deeper into the man-made chasm, the gloom turning white walls into grey threatening cliffs. The sun could not winkle its way into such a place, and water squelched under his foot as Jerome slowly closed the car door. It was a dreadful sight, morbid, cold, and ideal. Mounds of rock scattered about the quarry floor brought him more pluses. They would be perfect cover from the blast. The cliffs were high enough to contain the sound of an explosion and hide the scene from prying eyes. It was also a place Jemma could not be invited to. Twice his car had slipped on the dusty slope, two skids that had changed his thinking. He, and not Jemma, would bring Nicholas to the quarry. The drive into the quarry had been difficult. Getting out was treacherous. The slime at the bottom of the track wrapped itself around his tyres, allowing only a few metres forward before the incline hauled him back. But Jerome had driven in the desert, using a trick he had learned among the sand dunes of Iraq. He beat the green ooze by reversing up the steep path. Slimy tyres were quickly coated with clogging dust on the upper levels, bringing one of his spinning wheels almost over the edge. His burst back through the brambles and sudden backwards-facing arrival in the middle of the lane would have had a policeman filling his notebook. But there was no policeman in the lonely lane, and anyway, the next car going into the quarry would not be coming out. Definitely, Jemma could not be expected to enter the quarry. An hour later, and the missing car park clicked into place. It was a couple of miles beyond the lay-by. Incongruously, in the middle of the nowhere, a supermarket sprawled, and to Jerome's delight, its large car park. The quarry had loomed up as his number one killing venue. He sat for 2 hours, parked between a trolley cabin and the supermarket entrance. The turnover of vehicles was excellent. His car would never be noticed in the 50 minutes it would be parked when he went to the quarry. 2 miles from the quarry was ideal. Yes, it was here they would exchange cars. Jemma could wait in his car in the supermarket car park while he delivered Nicholas to the quarry. He would hand the grenade to Nicholas, hightail it out of the vehicle, and dive behind one of the piles of rock. After the kill, a man walking with a stick in a country lane, even if he was seen, would not arouse suspicion. There would be no tyre tracks, vehicle sightings, no evidence of any sort. Jemma would be out of it. It would be the perfect crime. For once, Jemma's phone call lasted for more than 10 words. She suggested they met on her way back from her sister's in the bar in Paddington Station, choosing corner seats that were well away from the crowd at the bar. Jemma, her index finger on the tip of her nose and her hand flattened vertically over her mouth, nodded as he presented his plan. The expression on her face is difficult to translate minus a mouth. Her eyes rested steadily upon him, and only occasionally a millimetre of movement from her eyebrows as he spoke indicated she was in fact listening. A signal he began to disbelieve, as it was 2 or perhaps 3 minutes after he had finished before she spoke. Although she stared at him, her eyes, glazed with concentration, registered nothing. He had never witnessed such consuming attention. Speaking would not get through. He had no doubt her ears were as glazed over as her eyes. Her nod broke her coma. Her hand taking his, and a smile of acceptance sealed the plan. You have worked well, Jerome. Yes, there are no loose ends. Planning the crime had been a comfortable exercise. With no date set, he had felt no urgency or stress. Tomorrow, I shall bring Nicholas to you in the supermarket car park, after he he has had is liquid lunch, she said positively. His cloud of serenity vaporized. No. His yell turned every face in the bar towards them. Startled, she pulled her hand away. Panic grabbed him. It was too soon, too quick, much too fast. He had not had time to check the quarry thoroughly, or the traffic, or the locals, or the weather, or... His protests were halted. Several sheets of A4 paper appeared in her hand. Words were unnecessary. Her expression was telling him to read. Nicholas was setting up his wife's death again. The lover was waiting for her to return to her flat. He was sitting in a car opposite the front door of the mansion block, a loaded Colt weighing in his lap. Nicholas' twisted mind had made a point of the date for the killing. His wife's birthday. It is my birthday in 2 days. She did not look at him, as if frightened he would see the fear in her eyes. The poison had not worked, so the next trick was shooting. Nicholas was pulling strings that were attached to them, and he would go on pulling. If one scheme did not work, write another. Either way, they would jump. This time he had passed the job on to the lover, to Jerome. Jerome's distress reduced to dismay. Nicholas had to be stopped, and fast. Jemma was right. Tomorrow, Godfrey would be put to work. His plan would not be as fine-tuned as he had wished, turning his dismay to discomfort. The weight of what they were about to do settled on his shoulders, reminding him of his training in the army. Safe in a camp in England had been a bit of a game. He never really believed he would put his killing skills into practice. But when he was loading his gun and leaving his camp in Iraq, the same feeling had dragged at him. He was not ready. He had not practiced enough, and that led directly to the entrance marked fear, and that door was wide open. If it rained, the narrow track down into the quarry would be impassable. If it was a fine, hot day, there could be hikers, dozens of them, all over the North Downs. Maybe something local had been planned for tomorrow, a parade that passed the quarry. Maybe the owner would arrive to check his property. Maybe health and safety would make an inspection. A kiss landed on his forehead. Jemma was standing. She had to leave. She was due home in half an hour and would be there all the evening. I will phone you in the morning for the meeting place. She walked to the door, turned, and gave him a half smile before disappearing into the crowd of commuters. Half a smile was the most she dared. She was a celebrity's wife. He finished reading Nicholas's draft manuscript. The Colt the lover was carrying bothered him. A Colt was a pistol. Did Nicholas not know about his collection? Sitting in a busy bar of a mainline terminus allowed the contrast to what he was doing and what Nicholas had written for him to do to point up the absurdity of his present life. They could, of course, not kill Nicholas, let the story run, see what happened. They knew the ending. It would be easy to avoid it. He was in control of himself. Okay, so he had lied to Jemma. Just one little slip did not make him into a character-changing killer. The man in the doorway of the bar was scanning the customers inside, obviously looking for one in particular. Jerome's hands dropped to his lap, exhibiting his surprise. He knew the man, and he had a pretty good idea who he was looking for. Jerome! Leaving the entrance, it took only 5 strides for him to flop into the chair vacated by Jemma. Charlie! Surprise? Yes. Puzzlement? Yes. Discomfort? Yes. Jerome managed to pack all 3 into the man's name. Charlie had a small parcel that, after a theatrical glance around the bar, he slipped across the table. Okay? Jerome stared at the parcel. What was he supposed to say? Have a gander before I go. Charlie pushed the parcel nearer. Dropping the package below the table, Jerome did as he was told, ripping the single piece of sellotape off the opening of the box. A quick peer inside was enough. The hair on the back of his neck froze vertical, his mouth dropped open, and the package dropped to the floor. The metallic clang stopped the drinking. Frowning faces swung in their direction. Shit! Charlie was lightning. Reaching under the table, he scooped up the package, hiding it in his lap. With no blood or bodies filling the floor, the owners of the faces reburied them in their tankards, leaving a red-faced Charlie and a white-faced Jerome to continue to decorate the corner of the bar. Jerome's hands appeared on the table, palms uppermost in askance. Charlie pushed the package back across to him. For fuck's sake, take it. It was an American Colt. Jerome did not collect American weapons. His shaking head was a trigger for Charlie's annoyance. You ordered the fucking thing. You pay for the fucking thing. Now take the fucking thing. Charlie stood up but stopped his turn away. Jerome, what the fuck's up? Jerome watched in horror as his hands slipped the weapon into his pocket. He had not asked them to do that. Jerome, you're frightening me. If his client had erupted with the blue blisters of the plague, Charlie could not have been more rattled. You look as though you're going to kill someone. Jerome was a pleasant guy. Jerome was easygoing. Jerome was one of his softer clients. But the expression on the face of the man looking up at him made Charlie shiver. Sit down. No one would argue with that tone of voice, so Charlie sat. Believe me, Charlie, when I tell you, I did not order that gun. Charlie believed. Charlie would believe anything the man said who looked as though he would kill. You phoned. Jerome shook his head. Someone phoned. Jerome nodded. They said they were you. Charlie looked down, avoiding the icicle stare from the man opposite. He said to bring the gun here at 5 o'clock. Charlie looked at his watch. It was less upsetting. Put your hands on the table. Charlie put his hands on the table. Turn them over. Charlie turned his palms uppermost. It was there, weighing them down in an instant. The package. Now go. You paid for it. How did I pay for it? Cash, through my letterbox. I don't know where you live, Charlie, but someone does. Charlie did not exist. Charlie did not pay national insurance, income tax, parking, or speeding fines. He had spent a great deal of money and time disappearing from officialdom. He had come into the bar a happy freeloader, that his profession was known, that he could be found easily by a stranger, saw him leaving, a changed freeloader. Even the double profit he would make when he sold the gun did not balance the misery that he might be forced to turn into a law-abiding citizen. Nicholas was working well. Not only did he know Jerome's relationship with Charlie, he was also able to tell him where Jerome would be to deliver the gun. This was exceptionally brilliant. The agreement to meet in the bar at Paddington Station had been taken only a couple of hours ago, yet Nicholas was already plotting it the day before. 10 minutes ago, Jemma had been sitting in the chair Charlie had just crawled out of. If Nicholas knew where Jerome would be, did he know his wife would be with him in the bar? There was also another question. Nicholas had had a pistol delivered. The all-seeing scribe, the creator of a dozen bestsellers, the wife-beating drunk, had made a mistake in his plotting. The pistol, by itself, was a useless lump of metal. For Jerome to use it required at least one more piece of metal, a bullet, and Charlie had not brought him any. Too much was happening too quickly. His planning was in disarray and unfinished. Charlie appearing added to the chaos his emotions were being battered with. He had to stop. Everything had to stop. There could only be one subject he could concentrate on, the most important, rising high above the priorities of the rest. Nicholas will not make me kill Jemma. He spoke out loud to convince himself it did not matter. His statement was flattened by the shrieks of alcohol-fueled laughter from all four corners of the bar. Nicholas will not make me kill Jemma, he repeated. It was as simple as that. Jerome cemented his promise with a swig of beer, slamming down the glass with determination. The gun had gone. He would leave London after the murder for a week, and he would make sure he was nowhere near Jemma for some time after. But before that, he had a minor detail to attend to: the death of Jemma's husband. Standing, he marched resolutely out of the bar. Nicholas Lumarine would have to be more than brilliant to plot his way around that. It was at a bus stop waiting for his 65 bus that a howl of pain in his right ear should have made him leap. It didn't. Jerome had stepped back in shock. The foot Jerome's heel gouged belonged to a man who could have screamed another 50 decibels into Jerome's tympanum, and even then Jerome would not have reacted. Jerome had gone down the mental lane in everyone's head that leads to their bottles of panic. A thought had whistled between his ears and smacked him between the eyes on the inside of his skull. A thought so obvious that neither he nor Jemma had realized the danger they had just created. Jemma said she would bring Nicholas to him tomorrow. Jerome had outlined the plan for Nicholas's death. All seeing, all hearing Nicholas was probably, at that moment, writing what she had said. Now Nicholas would know the fate that would be waiting for him, and that was a hell of a complication. Jerome's preparations to kill Nicholas are faultless, except for one, a mistake he has already made. Listen to the next episode of Imagine.